and Tess Witty, a translation and localization expert who is specializes in digital marketing and localization of software as a service companies. And here, like for a long time already, at Linear Translations, we are keeping up with the industry trends and trying to innovate to add more value to our partners and customers. Machine translation is one of the hot topics we have here, and we have gone through a lot um, in recent times, and we have faced a lot of challenges, learned a lot, and you are learning only by doing. And that's why today we would like to give you some insights with how to remain successful in this competitive machine translation era. And in the upcoming hour, we will discuss the increasing value of machine translation and AI technologies. How does this affect the future of the language industry, and how can you remain competitive and successful in a technology-driven world? Before I give the floor to the first speaker, I would like to inform you that after each presentation, we will have a short Q&A session with the speaker. So please prepare your questions in the comments, and we will try to answer all of them. But now we can start. And then I would like to introduce you our first speaker, Viveta, which is who is a translation and localization industry specialist at Intern Translations, and she holds a Master in Arts in Translations and New Technologies from the Iona University. And now she is doing a PhD research on MTPE tools, techniques, and training. Viveta will give you the best practice for efficient machine translation and post editing. So hope Viveta, you are ready. The floor is yours.
I'm ready. Thank you very much. So let me first share the screen. Okay. Okay, everything is set up. So I'm very happy to be with you today and have the opportunity to present you the best practices for efficient machine translation post-editing. As Eric said, I'm Viveta Jean, PhD candidate at the Ionian University with Dr. Wilhelmini Sosoni as my supervisor, working on the creation of a post-editing training model for professional translators. In parallel, I work with Intertranslations. Intertranslations is an ISO certified company with headquarters in Athens, offices in London and Paris, and business units in China and Turkey. We translate from all EU and Asian languages and specialize in many verticals, as you may see: EU affairs, law, IT, software, e-commerce, construction, automotive, life sciences, medical devices, and games. Our services include translation, transcreation, post-editing, annotation, software and web localization, SEO, interpreting, transcription, and MT creation and training. So let's see the agenda for today. We're going to touch some topics which I feel that they're really important here. So one of them is the definition of machine translation post-editing in the modern workflows. And then what are the challenges of the post-editing workflow for the post-editors? What is the role of the post-editor nowadays, and some tips and tricks for efficient MTP, along with guidelines on what to do and what not to do. And we're going to finish with some ways, some guidelines to address the challenges for the post editors, and have to do with the communication between post editors and LSPs. And as we said, we're going to have some time for questions. So, starting with the definition of machine translation post-editing in modern workflows, because maybe many of you in the audience are post-editors. We're going to see what is a comprehensive post-editing workflow consisted in. So a comprehensive post-editing workflow consists in 3 human-centered tasks. As you may see on the screen, we have 3 human pictures. It is pre-editing, post-editing, and annotation. and annotation, quality checks, and MT evaluation processes. So it should be noted that not all translation projects are good candidates for a comprehensive three-step post-editing workflow as per O'Brien, as this depends on the language combination, the specialization field, the use case scenario, the nature, the volume, the budget, the deadline, and the most important, a collaborative post-editing protocol established between LSPs and the client. So let's see one by one the phases. The first phase is pre-editing. So according to O'Brien, pre-editing is intended for very specific domains and companies. And the goal is to end up with a source that will be well understood by both the reader and the MT engine. In this aspect, we consider controlled language as a way of expression that is more compatible with the MT engine's own language. Then we go to phase two. And after the aforementioned pre-editing steps are completed, then the untranslated text is connected to an existing translation memory. And at this point, we leverage the matches from previously translated content. So this process results in a text partially translated only by TM retrieved segments. And then this is where MT comes into play with lowest scoring untranslated strings, meaning from 0 to 50% matches, going through the engine to be translated. Then we go to phase three. And the final product here is an entirely translated text, which, however, contains machine translation errors that are going to be processed during the actual post-editing stage of the workflow. So this hybrid text, it combines matches retrieved from human-generated translation memory and machine-translated output, is what should ideally reach the post-editor in order to ensure minimal editing effort and superior linguistic quality. And then we follow with phase 4 and 5, where we have the linguistic checks and annotation. And this is where the post-editing workflow is finalized with performing the QA checks for the project in order to determine whether the desired quality level has been attained, followed by MT evaluation processes and the error annotation. To comment here that not all the phases of this post-editing workflow are followed by LSPs. There are some LSPs, maybe the bigger ones, following the full set of this workflow. Normally, we stick to phase 3 and 4, where we have the post-editing human task and the quality checks. So now let's see what are the definitions of the human-centered tasks. We said that the human-centered tasks are pre-editing, post-editing, quality checks, MT evaluation, and error annotation. You may read the screen. I'm not going to go that extensively in this part. So pre-editing is pre-processing of the source text using a set of stylistic guidelines or rules to improve the raw output quality, reducing the machine translation post-editing effort, and increasing the productivity. So we use a sort of controlled language in order to minimize the machine translation post-editing effort and try to learn to teach the engine how to understand better the language of the post-editor. Then we have post-editing. Post-editing is to edit, modify, and or correct pre-translated text that has been processed by an empty system from a source language into a target language. This is the main human-centered task. It needs clear understanding of the errors produced by the MT engine. And the key here is how errors are handled by the linguist, which is actually what has to do with the training of the linguist. And we have a triple goal: increase productivity, reduce effort, which may be cognitive, technical, or temporal, and at the same time maintain the quality. Now, there is a big discussion here about what we expect to be the quality of the post-edited text. And normally in the industry, we say to cover all aspects that quality has to be what the quality agreed with the customer is. So it is customer centric. It could be a customer centric definition of post-editing in our industry. And then we have the quality checks, MD evaluation, error annotation, and the machine translation evaluation provides quality data for the MD system used, identifies edit patterns, and determines whether the engine is appropriate for a specific type of content. The more important thing here is the error annotation, meaning the classification and analysis of errors using reporting systems and tools. And this show us how important is the linguist feedback in this process. And of course, everything in these processes, in these human-centered tasks, reveals the importance of the training. So let's go and see a little bit the challenges of the post-editing workflow. In 2020, I had a webinar for Gala, and one of the questions in a survey we we prepared was, what are the post-editor's challenges on a scale from 1 to 5? So you may see that we had different options like lack of post-editing skills and competencies, lack of training opportunities in the post-editing process, lack of transparent compensation strategy, ambiguity of post-editing tasks, and ambiguity of metrics used by LSPs to calculate speed and evaluate quality. So you see here that even if productivity increases while quality is maintained, actual experience shows that post-editing is a tiring task for translators. And this is based on Gerber of research in 2018, which pushes boundaries and has no clear boundaries as a service, which is actually the main challenge. So in the context of this survey, um, SLV's responses, meaning post-editors' responses, validate the feedback we also had from LSPs, from language service providers, prioritizing the lack of training, the lack of post-editing skills, with most important being the ambiguity of post-editing task guidelines, which actually highlights the importance of the mutual collaboration between LSPs and post-editors in terms of training. So now you can see how we summarize right now the challenges of the post-editing workflow for the post-editors and of the post-editing in general. We face the negative attitude of the post-editors because of the lack of training, the fear of the future, which has to do with the last point, the overestimation of the power of NMT, that there is no transparency right now of the compensation models, and needs more work from all parties in order to have a solution. Of course, we said there is the lack of machine translation post-editing training, the lack of trainers even on the academic level, and the lack of machine translation post-editing ethics code showing and defining the transparency needed for all parties and the trust that we need to build from the client and then going to the LSP and the post editor. So here I only mention the challenges we face right now to be all of us on the same page. And by the end of the presentation, I'm going to show you some ways to address these challenges. So now let's see something that is more to the point and something that, brings more concerns. So we have the role of the post editor, and the common question is about the post editor profile, if it is a translator or a reviewer. And this is the basic question. So post-editing differs from the revision of a human translation output on several fronts. First of all, the types of errors to be corrected are different. Second, the misconstruction of meaning will occur at different levels. And last, the post-editing seeks the minimum steps required for an acceptable task. In order to decide on whether to translate or post-edit, the following parameters should be considered. What is the type of text? If it is, what is the empty system? If it is general, client-specific, vertical, what is the purpose of the text? And if it is of publishable or non-publishable quality. And let's see now a matrix I have prepared with the MTP skills and effort. Post-editor skills are tightly correlated to the concept of effort. Thus, the post-editor profile should not be mixed with the translator or a reviewer profile. Post-editor skills include excellent editing skills and word processing experience. This means full key, proficiency, efficiency in cursor positioning, effective use of search and replace functions, ability to work and make corrections directly on the screen. And these 2 points make the technical effort. And then we go to the temporal effort, which has to do with the ability to always balance post-editing speed with respect to required quality. And we go ahead with the cognitive effort, which is the knowledge of source and target language, the expertise in the subject area, the ability to adapt to different specifications required for each job, and the specific knowledge of the weaknesses and the errors of a particular machine translation system. Now, the most important is the psychological effort, which has to do with the positive attitude to machine translation. Based on our recent research, it showed up that post-editors, I mean translators who post-edited and had a negative attitude towards MT had poor results in terms of productivity and quality in comparison with translators and post-editors who had a positive attitude to MT. And going further, if the negative attitude changes to positive, then the productivity and quality are improved. So let's see now the common errors of the post-editors. The common errors have to do with the stylistic preferential changes when post-editors under-edit or over-edit the translations, when we leave inconsistent terms in the output, or we have untranslated, added, or omitted words, unlocalized or incorrect acronyms, unlocalized text, it may be typos, or we may ignore the false cognates. We may have errors on the structure level, and what I call machine translation is, which means that the engine produces some neologisms, and these are not detected by the translators and the post editors, and this is also one of the common errors. And now let's see what are the methods and the tasks actually we do in order to handle this empty output and errors. So we have fixing punctuation and capitalization, changing sentence and phrase structures, we edit grammatical agreements like singular, plural, masculine, feminine. We add, delete punctuation symbols, change the formatting, remove or add words, and retranslate whole words or expressions. So these are the tasks. And here you may find some guidelines in order to handle common errors. So what we have to do is to fix any wrong term in the text, and we also need to correct terms that are inconsistently used. And when we have inconsistencies in the use of terms, we fix syntactic errors, which consists of wrong part of speech. We may have an incorrect phrase structure, a wrong linear order of words. We fix the morphological errors like number, gender, case, person, tense, mood, voice, aspect. Any missing text should be fixed as long as this omission interferes with the message being transferred. Any misspelling, any incorrect punctuation, as long as it interferes with the message, not something preferential. And we do not fix the stylistic problems unless they interfere with the message once again. Of course, we fix any offensive and inappropriate or cultural unacceptable information. Now here you may see how we can depict this and have like guidelines of what to do and what not to do. So what we do is to correct grammar, syntax, semantics, and punctuation to ensure that the context has no omissions or additions. And when working in a CAT tool, we have to ensure that all tags are correctly placed. And of course, our goal, let's say, our basic guideline is to retain as much empty output as possible. And what we do to go faster while trying to keep our quality is to use the keyboard and the shortcuts. What we don't do is to hesitate too long over a problem, meaning that if we see that a sentence needs a lot of work to be done, then it's better to rewrite it. And we use empty suggestions if a large piece of information of the sentence is correct. The raw empty quality is very good with only minor corrections needed. The raw empty quality is not so good, but still faster to correct it, and the empty has the correct meaning. Now, when we don't use empty suggestions, apologies, is when the raw empty output makes no sense. And if you need more than a few seconds to understand the target, the output, and when there are errors that require rearrangements of most of the text. So what are the tips and tricks for efficient MTP? We need to learn the basic shortcuts of the CAD tool and the word processor to go faster. There is a lot of technical effort while using the mouse or not knowing the shortcuts, and this is a basic. And this is not something that I just say, it's because we had this research during the MEMSers workshop, and we proved that working this way with these guidelines indeed make post editors faster. So you use your keyboard as much as you can. Use the mouse only if an action cannot be performed using the keyboard. And it's really useful to use or learn blind typing, even if in our research it did not show up to make a big difference. Then, to summarize, we have three steps: find and replace to massively change every change made to the rest of the document. It can be like a word style pattern, terminology, number, acronym, punctuation, double spaces, and capitalization. And this find and replace feature really saves time. To use the shortcuts to change the formatting, edit the text, and to use the keyboard to move within a segment or add and delete output. And what is the translation process of a post editor? Well, there are many working patterns and reading writing patterns based on the style of its linguist. We can read the source, read the target, then start post editing, or we can read the target, read the source, then start post editing, or read the target, read the source, and start post editing in parallel. And in this slide, we depict the process, and you can see how is linearly going. Read the empty output, compare with source text. We assess the quality of each segment based on instructions, decide on appropriate translations, manipulate text to improve or retranslate. So post editors also have to switch often between language 1 reading and language 2 reading, and the comprehension clearly varies based on the source text characteristics as well as on the post editor's language skills and topic knowledge. And of course, there are factors affecting quality and effort, like the formatting of the file format, actually, not the formatting, the file format, the domain and style, the document statistics, the length of the segments, the complexity of the segments, the quality, and the translation memory quality, and the size of the translation memory. So how can we make the most out of the CAT tool features? It is very important to take into account that we don't translate like out of a CAT tool, but we work in a CAT tool environment, which has many features, and we should also take into account the ergonomics and how can these features help us to go faster and maintain our quality. So let's take an example. A machine translation system will output the same error whenever it is given the same input, assuming all other conditions are also the same. If the empty output is used and other than for existing, the post editor needs to correct these reoccurring errors on a regular basis. This proves to be a time-consuming task and significantly reduces the productivity of the post editor and increase the cost of translation. So CAT tool features and translation memory integration can help to speed up this process. The findings suggest that machine translation is definitively suitable to be integrated into a translation memory. And second thing, even a slightly better empty output integrated into a translation environment can improve the translation performance. Third point, post-editing indicators should consider, if possible, also the personal performance of each translator. So translation memory as a feature is still valued higher than machine translation, with 70% of translators believing it to increase throughput and preserve consistency, while 40% think machine translation usage is problematic due to the amount of errors. This is what I can share based on the research of Murkens and O'Brien in 2017. So translator can boost throughput from 2,000 to 4,000 or 8,000 words per day while maintaining a good level of quality if he or she switches to post-editing of machine translated text. A huge increase in productivity after a certain period of adaptation is the reason that post-editing of machine translation is quickly overtaking regular translations. So here are some CAT tool features that help us boost the productivity. You see the filter features, the find and replace features, the shortcuts, as we said, the formatting features, the segmentation features, automation, terminology features, and we can set up terminology management systems to help post editors ensure consistency with translation memories, term bases, and any useful reference documents. And this, of course, should be kept up to date for future projects. Then we have the machine translation quality estimation. This feature can provide quality scores for all empty output, giving editors an indication of how much work is required for each specific segment. And it can help linguists and project managers to identify the segments that they should prioritize for editing. And then, of course, we have the very important feature of the QA, which may be integrated or standalone. And this will help dynamically identify any issues in the original output that were overlooked or new errors that were introduced during the post-editing step. So here what we have to do is to reinvent actually machine translation post-editing in the CAT tool interface. And you may see here, in addition to all the actions we already mentioned about the filters, the keyboard, the patterns, that we should also use the CAT tool independent shortcuts. And I may share with you after the presentation slides, and you can keep this as a reference for the shortcuts you may use, and the different actions like copy, paste, bold, find, replace, show white spaces. things like that that seem so trivial, but in reality save a lot of time. And it's not the save time, it is that we save time from the temporal, from the technical effort, in order to have more time for our cognitive effort, for our cognitive part of the process, which is actually the more important and related to the quality. So regarding the challenges that we discussed earlier, the most important part is the communication with LSPs. And based on this communication of the post editors and the LSPs, we build actually the code of ethics and the transparency needed to have the positive attitude of the post editors. So we need to shed light on gray areas, and we need to have a common definition of the service. What do we mean right now by post editing, as this is currently even to be revised in the ISO standard? And we need to set the use case and purpose and be very honest and transparent, and see if the use case and purpose are relevant for the text to be a candidate for post editing. And then we should prepare the relevant machine translation post editing guidelines. And regarding this part of guidelines, because there is a recent research we started, it's not only giving the guidelines, but it is also how these guidelines are formulated, if and what is the format, what is the length, and how they are given to the linguists. So one thing to solve is to have the correct type of guidelines. And then we need more transparency regarding the MT engine quality level and the errors of the MT, meaning that these things should be communicated to the linguists, and we should first, as LSPs, have evaluated if the results are really what we expect them to be, in order to apply the compensation models and make these compensation models more transparent. Normally, in the training, I have received post-editing training files I have received so far by different companies. It does not seem that these contain the errors of the MT engine or the type of the MT engine. You may find material like what was mentioned before about the do and don't, but not specifically to have you alert on what are the errors that you have to correct, or the how to correct these errors. And then, of course, the most important is for all of us to support a positive attitude, because in the code of ethics, we say of the translation, and I think it is something that it is stated in the FIT, but I'm not sure, so yeah, I need to check again. It is that code of ethics means that translators invest in self-development, and this is something that we should do. It's not something that is it is, you know, if we want to do it or not. To be professional translators, we should invest in our development, and this means upskilling and reskilling, and it is a continuous process. So technology is here to help us, and we are the experts that we are going to handle this technology. And on the other hand, we should be realistic and not over exaggerate regarding the power of machine translation. So I feel that I tried to give you an idea of what is coming, that we should all invest in training, we should all be open to development and new technologies, and build together a code of ethics in order for this service to be well embraced and advanced. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much, Viveta. This was one insightful presentation, and I really do hope those you are mentioned 40% which are still doubtful about MTPE, you mentioned, are now more encouraged to use it, and do not afraid, as this is not a threat. And now let's do a Q&A session, and then let's check if we have any questions. We do have one question, but that's more related to webinar. And yes, there will be a recording of the webinar, so you will be available to receive it. So no worries. And there are not other questions. Oh no, there is from our other speaker. What do you think should be included in educating translators in post editing?
Okay, so I think this is something we all work on right now, but what is missing? I mean, okay, for professional translators, we need more practice. We need, we have all the theory, but okay, post editors are not really much interested in the theory of machine translation, which is included in more of the training sessions that you know are here and there in the industry. So we should focus on something like an interaction training, which means that they would have the possibility to check themselves if they improve, and after having some practice, then possibly to self-evaluate themselves with in their language combination, in their language pair, and feeling confident that they use specific guidelines, that these guidelines work, and somehow convince themselves that this training has results. So this is what we miss right now, I think, and that's why there is this topic of negative attitude and around. So if we have the results in front of us after the training, then we're all going to be convinced. And regarding the rest, meaning if it is, of course, translation theory, if it is like decision-making skills exercises or problem solving or anything like that, these are still under research, I think. But it seems that something related to decision-making and problem solving, it should be very relevant to this specific task of post-editing, because it is all translation, but the task is post-editing.
Okay, thank you very much, Viveta. I hope we answered your question, Tess. And Tess will be our next speaker. And I would like to shortly introduce Tess, but I will ask Viveta if you could stop sharing your screen. Would be much appreciated. And thank you also, Viveta, for
Thank
the
you very
answer.
much.
Thank you. And our next speaker will be Tess Vitti, which is digital marketing, which are specializing in digital marketing and localization for software as a service companies, consumer products, and e-commerce. And Tess holds a degree in international marketing. And in 2020, she was ranked among the top 50 world's industry localization influencers by NIMSI. With Tess, you will have the opportunity to learn how to remain successful in the machine translation driven world. And yes, so Tess, the floor is yours. And then yeah.
Thank you. Eric, can you see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen.
Okay, great. And thank you, Viveta, for that interesting presentation. And I would like to say welcome to everybody attending today. And thanks you to Linearis for organizing this. So yes, I have worked as a translator for a very long time, and I've been following the development of machine translation since I got started. Actually, in the beginning, 18 years ago, there was really no talk of machine translation. Then when we started talking about machine translation in the industry, it was we kind of mocked it, and we thought it was funny because of all the funny translations it could produce. But as the years have passed and the machines have developed, it has become better and better, and the quality has become really good. So translators have started fearing the machine translation. But now, these last years, machine translation has become one of several valuable tools that we can use to provide professional translations. And I wanted to talk about that today. So I wanted to talk about the current situation in the industry for translators and translation companies, how we can interact with machine translation, uh, um, both as post editors, but aside from post editing in particular, and how we can embrace it, and some macro and micro solution to compete with machine translation. So let's get started. And yes, I've been a translator for a long time, English to Swedish. But my previous career and education was in marketing, international marketing, and I have also trained other translators in marketing their businesses for over 10 years. And during the past 12 years, I have studied development of machine translation, and I have attended many presentations on machine translation myself, and I've answered many questions about it during my presentations and courses. So I keep being interested in the development. So this presentation is based on my own experience, but also on general opinions of colleagues and industry experts. And I will provide some resources at the end, and you will get the whole presentation. So let's first look at the current situation for freelance translators and language service providers in our digital world. Employment outlook for translators and interpreters is projected to grow by 30% through 2024, and this is from a outlook in I think 2 years ago from My Plan Careers, Interpreters and Translators. So that is really good. We are in a growing industry. However, the growth is in volume. Our expenses go up, but the rates have remained stagnant or decreased. Not for everybody, but the general industry. Some business economists claim that the translation is a growth industry, but the problem is that the growth is in volume and not necessarily rates. So this means that cheap service is growing faster than quality. So the big question has then been that I have received, and maybe you ask, are we going to be replaced by machines? And my answer is that I don't think so. After 12 years of following the developments in machine translation, my current opinion is that there is a need for both machine translation and professional high-quality human translators. I also attended a panel with localization industry experts last fall called the Translation Work Environment of the Future at the Innovation in Translation Summit. And all the panelists, the experts there, agreed that human translators will still be needed in 2030. I also attended a presentation by Jay Marciano from Lengo during the ATA conference last fall called Thriving in the Age of Artificial Intelligence-Driven Language Services. And the conclusion is that if reliable and secure translation is desired, machine translation should not be used without the ongoing involvement of professional translators. So for translators, this means that our toolset have been expanded by yet another potential resource that will prove valuable and increase productivity if used appropriately. So Viveta talked about post-editing, and she also mentioned the psychological factor among translators, and I will talk about the psychological factor a lot here. How we can embrace the developments in machine translation and still maintain our professionalism. And Taus has written a great article about this called What Options Do Translators Really Have? And they have 3 suggestions for us. We can no longer stick our heads in the sand and pretend that it won't affect us. Instead, we need to have an open and positive attitude and learn as much as possible about the developments. And like Jay Marciano said, instead of freaking out about a dystopian future, we need to view ourselves as an intelligent system ourselves, the best machine translation. We need to stay curious and we need to build a better work model. But most importantly, if we want to compete with machine translation, we have to move up in the value chain. We can offer value-added consultancy services, and this is apart from post-editing. We can advise on cultural, technical, or authoring issues, or provide controlled language services. And I will give you examples too. So, there is room for both machine translation and professional human translators. But if we human translators want to remain successful, we have to focus on this segment, the high quality and the transcreation segment. High quality translations are those that require an expert touch of a practiced translator with a full command of the context, the human intent, and the target audience. So, to stay successful, we need to focus on training ourselves to become really good at translation, copywriting, and cultural consultation. We also need to focus on being very professional in our business. This also means that less good translators or less professional translators will be outcompeted by machine translation. Let's dig a little deeper into this. The ATA Chronicle had an article about macro and micro solutions to counteract the threat from machine translation called "Is There a Future in Freelance Translation?" Let's talk about it. This article suggests both macro and micro solutions. The macro solutions are things that individual translators have limited power over, but professional associations and language service providers and even governments may be able to help. And these include large-scale client education. This is possibly the cornerstone of the change, the one thing that may change consumer perception and revalue the profession in the eyes of the general public. As the treasurer of ATA said, American Translators Association said, together we can educate the public to ensure that our consumers value us more like diamonds and less like water. Another thing that plays a big part is language education. If our customers don't know any other languages or how hard it is to communicate correctly in another language, they will also have a hard time understanding the value of high quality translations. The world is shrinking, but we are still speaking many different languages. And the last one is industry-wide regulations. Whether we're talking of regulating access to the profession itself or controlling access to professional associations or online bidding platforms, there is no question that implementing industry-wide regulations would go a long way in limiting undifferentiated competition and ensuring clients that they are receiving the best possible service. But for individual translators, we need to focus on what we actually can do ourselves, the micro solutions. These include niche specialization, focus on areas where high quality human translators are imperative, adding further value to our translation services, and leverage machine translation in our own work. This is also what Taus suggested and let's take a closer look at those. So one solution is to specialize in a certain niche or topic. The more specialized we are in a certain topic, the more of an expert we become in this topic. When I started out, you could be successful as a generalist in the beginning, but now I think that new translators are competing more with machine translation, and it is more important than ever to niche down and specialize early on. And this is what I've been teaching and discussing a lot too. But there are also new and growing areas of specialization to consider. There's been a huge rise in the demand of digital marketing translation services. International companies realize that machine translation tools are simply not up to the challenge of optimizing a website and digital content for new markets, and are looking for native translators with experience in digital marketing. Here are some examples of the sectors or areas that are growing and that will need good translators. One is international search engine optimization. To get this right, you need more than just language skills. You need local expertise and knowledge about how a search works online in each target market. Getting keyword research right in all of your target markets is one of the first and most important steps, and requires more than the usual professional translation service. Companies are also increasingly seeing the need to be engaged in social media in order to represent their brand and moderate conversations. Now, there is a rise in chatbots, but they cannot really moderate real in-depth conversations with customers or stakeholders. I don't know about you, but if you have interacted with a chatbot, you know the limitations of it and how irritating it can be. International email marketing also poses some fairly serious challenges for businesses because of language and cultural differences, legal constraints, and different attitudes to technology and privacy. A local translator can help the company with these nuances. So, international email marketing, social media, localization of mobile and web apps, and multilingual content marketing. Jay Marciano also mentioned new services that will be needed. We will need language engineers for linguistic asset development and evaluation of the machines. And post-editing, like Viveta talked about, makes sense when training data is of very high quality and the domain of both training data and the translatable data is very well defined. If any of those parameters are not in place, any productivity gains made during using machine translation would be negated by increased professional human editing time. We will also need lexicographers, scripting and linguistic rules development, so developing rules for the machines, and language consultants, when to use human translators, when to use the machine, cultural aspects, context, and much more. So what were strategies for niche that were some strategies for specialization that we can do, and some new service areas. Now let's focus on areas where high quality translations are important, or humans. The first one is transcreation, which is sort of translation and copy editing combined, the art of creative translation. This requires deep consideration by a marketing-minded translator to ensure that the message keeps its impact and the meaning across linguistic borders. More than that, it requires an adaptation, perhaps, of the entire tone to ensure that it remains consistent with the target market. It's also not only language related. Transcreation is also cultural and emotionally related. Audiences react differently within their cultures to certain things like numbers, images, and even colors. Numbers and colors can cause issues due to superstitions And numbers in your brand name or even phone numbers can make the audience switch off or be wary of the company. And the opposite, of course. You can even do the opposite and gain their trust by using lucky numbers or colors to improve your brand engagement. So, machine translation will not be able to combine culture, language, and emotion into creative and compelling text anytime soon. For this, we need a human. Apart from transcreation, the more creative part of the text translation, there is also publications that absolutely need to be perfect for the company image. These are, for example, annual reports, pharmaceutical research journals, or any published material that can affect a company's image. And we can also become brand ambassadors or product testers. When companies with products want to sell their offerings, they need to personalize it to the tastes of the target market, and they will then depend on local ambassadors or consultants who can advise them on the cultural specifics of a given target community and help promote products and services in a given local language. So translators can be aware of the new opportunities that this can open up due to the knowledge of a specific language and culture, and we can offer services to the clients to help build trust among the consumers on the ground. And professional translators can also increasingly use machine translation data in concert with many other resources at our disposal to increase both translation speed and consistency. A professional translator can use the machine translation as reference material or as a source or alternative translation suggestions. For example, there's no need for me anymore to translate the names of the countries when I do translations, for example. Joost Schetsche, a colleague and friend, German and influencer in the localization industry, says, I believe we need to become more creative when using machine translation. We need to go beyond just the concept of post-editing. That can be done by having multiple machine translation engines connected to a project and just using fragments that can automatically be extracted, or by using machine translation to correct fuzzy matches. So to summarize all this, translators need to up their game. We need to focus on niche market. We need to use machine translation as a way to boost productivity or as a way to provide additional services. So with that, I would like to say thank you so much for attending. Here is my contact information. You will receive this in the presentation. And I also wanted to show the resources that you can read on your own and the resources used for this presentation. Now over to any questions.
Thank you, Tess. It was wow. I was actually looking more and more, but like good things come to an end. Thank you for wonderful presentation. Would be great if you stop sharing your screen so we could move to Q&A session.
Yes.
We will check if you have any question. There is no from the audience, but there is actually one from me. What I would like to know more, as you are holding marketing background and you also touched this creative industry in your presentation. Do you think there is any milestone when machine translation could impact also marketing area? Like at the moment, as we know, there needs for these creative translations need to be to have human. But do you think is there any milestone that machine translation could also affect the marketing vertical?
I think machines can already be used sort of as an additional translation memory, sort of as a resource. I don't think machines can you do the creative, cultural, and cultural adaptation anytime soon. I can't see into the future, of course, but I don't feel that they can do that in many years to come.
Okay, thank you very much. Because this is also what we have also here at Linares discussed when and if it would be possible, and that where we came that it's not anytime soon. Looking how it goes. But thank you for your answer. We have another question. Is it better to have empty output implemented in the CAT tool or use it as a suggestion, in your opinion?
I think it depends on what type of text you're translating. Same as Viveta said, it depends on how much the machine translation engine is helping and how fast it would be. Because if you implement it directly in a CAT tool, you're basically doing post editing already. So I think you just have to test out and see how it is, helping if it helps you and how good the quality is. It depends on also the machine the machine translation engine you're using, of course, but yeah, you would have to test it out. It depends on the language and context. Sometimes if you use it, it can actually decrease your quality because you think something sounds right, but it's not quite correct. So this is another thing that translators would have to be educated in when it is good to use it and when it's not good to use it. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much for the answer. I hope we answered the question of Vivetta. And okay, and yeah, this is it. We have come to an end. 1 hour with an insightful information, and I would like to thank both of the speakers for wonderful presentations. And as the speakers mentioned, the slides will be available after the webinar, and the recording also be available after the webinar, so you will be available to receive it. And also, thank you for all who found the time to join today for the webinar. And I would like you to don't miss out on any of our future events. So follow Linearis Translations, and let's meet another time. So thank you very much, everyone, and bye.
Thank you.